opposed to like, not telling me that when you're hitting record and you're just kind of like clicky. Yeah.
Yep. I do that every once in a while.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It does make it sting worse though when you don't. So it's
Okay, welcome to episode 585, and we are going to be we have a special Herp history edition tonight. We're going to be talking to Michael Berger, from the author of The Dragon Traders, which is a fantastic book. If you haven't picked it up, we'll get into that for sure. But basically, it's like a collective history of the reptile hobby.
right.
I mean, it's going back all the way to the beginning. And we were just talking to Michael a minute ago and telling him about our fun days of Martin's Aquarium and all that everybody's heard us talk about. But yeah, they were the early days of reptiles and
reptile adjacentness. Yeah.
So we're going to talk we're going to talk about the past, we're going to talk about the present, and we're going to talk about the future, and sort of get a feel for Michael's thoughts on the reptile hobby, some of his stories and experiences, what it was like putting the book together, all that kind of stuff. But what's new with you, Owen? Anything before we
I got nothing. No, I mean, I got another clutch of Mad Hogs because, again, like I think I said too loud that I don't need any more Mad Hogs. So then, this is the biggest clutch I've ever had. I got 11 eggs, and I'm
Holy
like, no,
shit.
wow. On top of the other 8 that I got. So now I got Mad Hogs, and that jungle clutch that I was waiting for hatched. One baby.
So what do you do with Mike?
Well, I asked Mike if he wanted
a King Solomon situation.
Well, I asked him if he wanted the top half or the bottom half. He said top half, please. I said I was so upset I was going to put rocks in my pockets, and if he needed me, I'll be in the ocean. He replied with, if I need you, you can't even hatch carpet python eggs.
What else would I need you for?
Which was very painful to me, and just reminds me again that these are some of my best friends that say this to me. So
it's all love, Owen. It's just love.
So it is a girl, so it's mine. It's staying here. But that was a nice little shot right to it, right when you're like, I can breed carpet python. No.
No, you can't.
6 fully formed dead in the egg.
Ouch.
Yeah.
They're probably gorgeous too, right?
Oh, they were absolutely stunning. And I'm like,
Doesn't hurt. Any thoughts on what happened? Just bad mail.
I have no. I know. I think he
shitty season introduction.
I think it's a shitty season. I think I should have put more substrate in the box but I did it like I always do. I don't know if they just didn't get humid enough in there and they dried up, but there was a mold problem that I was fighting too. I think it's just all a bad season all at once, just going nuts. But
yeah, I feel the same. I have Lucas is getting diamond clutches.
Lucas got a diamond clutch,
with the hands empty, you know?
Yeah.
I guess you're getting them from Lucas then.
Well, the fact that Lucas is like, I got diamonds, I got green tree pythons, I got indigos, and I'm like, I couldn't breed my Crebo. Like, he's been
made too powerful.
He is.
Nick,
we have to knock him down several pegs.
Like that's surrounding him.
Somehow we've created a monster, a breeding machine. So
so happy for him.
Going to have to stop him, but oh god,
he's crushing it.
Yeah, he is. Couldn't be more proud of him.
He's gonna replace me soon. I know it. You're gonna put me out to
somehow we've made our replacement one person. Like, he's one dude, but he's got you and me in there. Like, he's just gonna take over and we'll be done.
Yeah, he can do his own podcast.
Right. Goddamn. Like, let me off. I'll retire. So
yeah, now it's me trying to get out of the contract. Owen, he keeps me locked in. He's like,
don't make me do this with Lucas. It wouldn't be well. It would not go well.
So yeah, I real quick before we get on here and we talk about Herp history. Thing that pops into my head. We haven't had we had a show with Nick and Ryan, but that was before we went to Keith's for his little barbecue that he has, at the start of the season. And had a blast there, man. It's always good to go and hang out with
Jason Balin showed up out of nowhere. I was not expecting him.
That made me put a smile on my face. Yeah. Good for him.
And we were all very mean to Gary Shavino. The entire night we were all very mean to Gary Shavino.
Yeah. He's funny as shit.
He
though,
is
man. He
cracking
makes
me up the
laugh.
whole damn time.
I love the sense of humor where you can bust each other's balls.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter.
you've gotten
you know
to
what I
that
mean?
point. Yes.
I love that. Yeah.
Yep.
All good. But yeah, okay. Anything else before we get going here or what?
I think we're good. Let's just jump in.
Enough of us
Enough
rambling.
of us talking. No one wants to hear that.
Michael, welcome
Hey.
to MPR. Glad to have you. How you doing?
Yeah, nice to be here. How are you guys doing? You sound pretty good.
So far so good. Snake eggs going horrible, but it's what are you gonna do?
Everybody has that though. Everybody.
Oh yeah, everybody's got a year that kind of sends you reeling.
I'm hoping it's a better season for herping than it was for breeding snakes. that's my hope, right?
Hope for that.
You herp.
Yeah. Where do we herp?
Yeah.
Everywhere. We've been all over the U.S. Our big thing for herping is we're trying to hit all of the species of rattlesnakes in the U.S. We're up to 23. I think
some
Rob
of us
has 27.
Yeah, some of us are up to 23. Some of us are up to 27. I have like 8. Like I haven't been able to go on that many trips. So
that's a lot of time in Arizona and Southwest.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is nice. So
we also quite fond of Australia, being carpet python guys. So I've been there 5 times, 4, 5.
Once. Owen Pelly.
Yep. Owen Pelly. Yep. Yeah. With Keith, he did it. He found it. We would have been
bastard.
We would have probably still been looking at the ground and not have seen it if Keith hadn't been like, "Oh, it's up there." The fact that he was like, "There it is." I am think about that often of how we could have totally missed it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But let's talk about you and how you got into reptiles and how you got your start and how all that came about.
I went through the same thing that many kids do. I went to the museums when I was a little kid, and I saw dinosaurs. And dinosaurs were my gateway drug to reptiles. I went to the Field Museum. I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
And in 1965, I moved down to Florida, South Florida. And South Florida was the mecca of herps. You had not only great field herping, but you had all the animal dealers were down there. And so it was like so much wonderment. My first toad in 1967, my first anole in 1967, first garter snake in 1967, and caught an indigo snake in 1969, I think, roughly right around then. And so, I'd catch all these snakes and we'd see scarlet kings. And of course, I'm a little kid and you want to pounce on it, but is it a coral snake or is it a scarlet king?
Do the rhyme in your head.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But it was so cool to grow up in Florida because like I said, all the animal dealers were there. My mom would drive me here and there, and I'd pick up redfoot tortoises and leopard tortoises, and I bred my first snake in 1973. It was a corn snake, the lowly corn snake, but I mean, still, in 1973,
that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, it hangs on.
I was in 10th grade. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew from reading Caulfield and Roger Conant that I knew how to look at the sex by looking at the tail of the snake. And I knew springtime was when they breed. So I had a female from Pompano Beach, Florida, and a male from further south. I put them together in the spring and they mated right away. And I had 10 eggs and it just steadily went on from there. And I used to collect a lot of scarlet kings and not too many venomous snakes though. And but I never, I hung out with high school friends. We used to go out fishing, bass fishing. We'd come across a moccasin or a rat snake or something like that. So it's all incidental herping for the most part. And you mentioned about Owen Pelly up in the tree. That's how I caught my first Everglades rat snakes, is looking up in the trees and seeing them coiled up there.
Nice.
And anyway, as time went on, I lived up in Canada for a while in the 90s and met a lot of cool herpers up there, and eventually went to work at the San Antonio Zoo back down in Texas, and then the Dallas Zoo after that.
Okay, cool. Were you a reptile keeper at the zoo, or were you?
I was a reptile keeper at the San Antonio Zoo and the Dallas Zoo, and it provided a lot of opportunity. I was older in life. I was in my 30s, and but it was something I always wanted to do. So I met Alan Carden up in Canada at a Herp Expo, and he offered me a job, and I went down to San Antonio and got to work with Trachyboa and Tropidopus spicki and blackhead pythons and Jamaican boas and Virgin Island boas and all the stuff that you never have a chance to work with or hardly ever have a chance to work with as a private keeper. Fiji iguanas. They had a pair of Fijis. I built an outdoor pen for them and had eggs, like within a year.
Jesus.
So. And just to watch a Fiji's, I got a picture somewhere of one hatching, and it's just so cool. And the Tropidopus specki were really cool too because they had never been bred before, and we had 4 of them from the early '90s, and no one had an interest. And so when I got there, I separated them and cooled them down, and we had both females had a litter like within a week of each other. And it was just really, these are like little, 4 or 5 inch snakes that as babies, they look like California king snakes almost, like banded black and white, and just so cool. And so the zoological field offered a lot of opportunity, a lot of venomous opportunity too, bushmasters and
nice
mountain pit vipers and things like that.
That's awesome.
In the zoo field, in those early days of breeding reptiles, did you like was it an environment to where you guys shared information between zoos, or was it like sometimes like the reptile hobby was in the early days where they would keep that kind of info tight, unless they kind of were in the inner circle?
I think by the time I got into zoos, it was pretty loose by that time. It was not guarded. It was the reptile community, at least in the 60s and 70s, it was pretty tight-lipped, and no one would tell anybody else anything. But there was a certain amount of people that would publish in International Zoo Yearbook and early IHS bulletins that you'd learn how to do stuff. And but it was by the time I got into it, it was pretty open, But I didn't hang around a lot of Herp people. I hung around high school friends in my early age, and. So, anyway, so I went to San Antonio Zoo, and let me see where I was going with this. Then the Dallas Zoo after that, and worked Dallas Zoo. I wanted to always go to the Dallas Zoo because that's where Jim Murphy, one of my heroes, had been curator. And Dallas Zoo had such a rich history of breeding all kinds of, like 20 some odd species of rattlesnake, and in the first place, green tree monitor lizards were bred. First place, blackhead pythons were bred. Bolin's pythons, they had, I think, one kind of iffy viable egg, but it was like a place where it all started, at least for me. Dave Barker had worked there. Clay Garrett and a whole bunch of people I had heard. Steve Hammock worked there before he went to the Fort Worth Zoo. And so it was really an exciting place to be.
That is cool. What about a personal collection at the time? Did you have any herps that you kind of kept yourself, not just at the zoo or at work?
Yeah, well, so I got into venomous snakes, eyelash vipers and palm vipers.
Nice.
And so I've been keeping eyelash vipers for slightly over 30 years now, and probably have had 150 to 200 babies so far. And every litter is different. Sometimes I never had these big litters. I always had like 10 or 12, kind of average size litter. And but I had Tropidopus, other insular dwarf boas like Tropidopus green whale from Haiti. I had 8 of those. I had Caicos Island dwarf boas from the Caicos Islands. I had 3 of those. Bred those one time. Babies, we're talking like teeny babies. I had Angaleophis continentalis. I had a group of 10, and this is back in the 90s. And some of this stuff, working at the zoo and coming home to do your collection, I got kind of burnt out, quite honestly. You do 200 animals in the daytime, you come home. I didn't have 200 animals at home, but I still had maybe 100 or so. And I started to sell some, and I kicked myself in the butt thinking about. So I got rid of the Haitian dwarf boas. You can't get them today,
right?
Yeah.
And the Caicos Island dwarf boas. I sold some of those. I sold some of the Angaleophis, thinking that maybe in the future I would have a chance to get some more, but no, now they're all, at San Antonio Zoo sold their Tropidophis fecki and to Glades Herp, and they're completely like out of the hobby altogether. And,
yeah.
But anyway, so I started breeding emerald tree boas in the 90s, northern emeralds, and had several litters, and New Guinea carpet pythons.
Nice.
I forgot to mention, as a kid, I used to get a lot of redfoot tortoise eggs. I mean, all over the place. First time I bred them, I didn't know I bred them, and my neighbor found a baby redfoot tortoise in the yard. I had chicken wire. This is back in the 70s. I had chicken wire fencing, and you would think that a baby wouldn't have gotten through
just enough.
Just enough to get through.
Yeah.
And I felt so bad about it today, especially because I'm thinking of how many babies escaped before I finally penned up, proper pen. These animals. And but anyway, so about, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, no, probably 10 years ago, I got into annulated boas. And this was a snake that I had always heard of when I was a kid, or read about how rare it was. And I said, I want to get back into some snakes that I wish I had had earlier in my career. And so I got annulated boas and started collecting those. I've got about 20 adults right now. And
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. They're I brought an animal with me, by the way, and I can show you a
Sure.
Yeah.
This is an orange phase annulated boa, and
wow.
Anyway, it's
That's
pretty
gorgeous.
Cool. Yeah, they are pretty cool, and most of my animals are brown, but I started getting into the colored animals, and they're just So I went down to Costa Rica, Tortuguero, in 1995, 97, and 2000. And I found one of these in a tree. We were taking a daytime hike and looked up in the tree, and there's an annulated boa just just curled up in a bromeliad. I found a couple on Galeophis panamensis down there also. That was pretty cool to find also. So anyway, I got into these, and then I breed them. I have a gravid female right now. I've bred two. I had 2 litters last year. And normally I get 1 to 2 litters every year, and it's just a really cool snake. And
yeah, it is.
I've heard they're difficult to breed. Is that accurate, or is it just
they're corn snakes to me at least. Of course. No, I think of course it depends upon your males and your females, how you condition them. But I mean, I've got snakes I haven't bred. I have speckled forest pit vipers, both genniata, and I've had those for 15 years, and I've the females slugged out like 10 years in a row. And I just cannot figure out. I'm hoping this year, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But I mean, some people do better with certain species. There's no doubt about that. I've got Sanzinia, the Westerns also. I got those about 7 years ago, and I've got a gravid female right now. But I've talked to a lot of people that have never had luck with Sanzinia. Then I've talked about people that say they, Ricky Lockett, for instance, up in Fort Worth, and he breeds them year in and year out. He had a couple of litters of like almost 20 animals per litter.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, and he doesn't do anything with them. He brings them down to maybe the upper 60s at most, and they breed. Then I've talked to other people who taken them down into the 50s, and they they're really difficult. So it might be certain animals, it might be lineages, it might be who knows what.
Right.
But anyway, with the annulated boas, they're pretty easy to keep. I mean, they're just they're basic arboreal boas, and they're easier than emerald tree boas. Emeralds, I think some people do really good with them, but you got to have a feel for. They're more delicate, and so I've got some basins right now, and I got the Sanzinia. I've got some colubrids, and also a Hispaniola not dwarf boas, but the Chilobathris. What's this small one? Forest ground boa. So I've got some of those. Those are like little teeny, like almost like dwarf boas. And I haven't really paid a lot of attention, but I haven't had any luck with those yet, with those animals. But
okay,
that's cool.
And
are those the animals that you're keeping now? Have they always been something that you've been after, and you're just finally getting to them, or is it?
So the eyelash vipers, when I was up in Canada, I started meeting hot keepers up there, and it was the greatest environment because I got to talk to some of these people, and we'd share stories about going herping down south of the border, down in Florida and stuff. I was north of the border at that time. And anyway, most everybody up there had hot snakes. They had venomous snakes. And so I said, when I moved back down south, which I knew I was going to do, I got a job at the San Antonio Zoo, and I got eyelash vipers like within a month. And nice. Knock on wood, I've never been tagged or anything like that, but you have to pay certain attention to them, and they're just so beautiful. And then I saw them out in the wild in Tortuguero also.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Just hanging out in trees, and just, man, they're just so beautiful. And
I have this is an odd question, but when you see an animal that you keep in the wild, like, have you, I always try to learn something from that. Have you had any, do you try to learn something from that experience, or what's your feeling when you find that animal that you keep at home and then you see it in the wild?
Well, okay, so the annulated boa that I found in Tortuguero, it was up in a bromeliad. And so I found out, well, these guys do like to climb, number one, they're tree boas, but they're unlike emerald tree boas, which more or less hang on a branch somewhere here or there. These guys like to burrow down into the epiphytic growth, the bromeliads and stuff. And so I started providing little houses and stuff. So, and these little things, these little plastic pipes, they love to go in here and get really tight into, they have a sense of security when they're in something like this, or a log. And talking to people at Fort Worth Zoo, where they've bred a lot of annulated boas, that's exactly what they said. They said they like to burrow into the some of the substrate and into the bromeliads that they provide, and into these little tight places. And so, looking at that one in the tree in the bromeliad, I started providing little comfort zones in the cages like that.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
The same with the Ungaleophis continentalis I had. They're just like annulated boas. I mean, almost like annulated boas. They're arboreal. They like to go into the epiphytic growth in the trees and under bark and stuff. And so I always provided little arboreal perches and houses and stuff, and epiphytic growth in the cages. And so you learn little tidbits here and there. And
yeah, it's, I always say it's like, it's a snapshot of what you're seeing, so you can't take everything that you see, but at least it gives you an idea of like what the environment's like, or what it's doing, or what the behavior, those kind of
absolutely things. And also, like, I live in Castroville, down near San Antonio, Texas, in South Texas. We're near 100 degrees today, by the way. And it gets so hot here. I mean, here it is. It's still May, and but I catch patch nose snakes and shots whip snakes and very fast moving snakes, and so seeing these guys, there's no way I would keep them in captivity. You realize that I wouldn't do justice. I would have to have a big cage, and so I think people who keep highly active snakes like that really have to make amends to larger cages and things like that.
Yeah.
I forget who it was, but somebody said if you're going to keep coach whips, you have to have like a 12.5 foot, cage or something like that, just because of a coach whip.
I would think so, but some people do keep the red-faced coach whips and successfully, and I'm not really sure. I would think the same thing with indigo snakes, but that's not the truth. Indigo snakes will breed in smaller cages. I think highly active snakes should be kept in as large of cage as possible.
I would agree.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, probably need the, that's how we get a lot of obese snakes, I think, a lot of times. Is just,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. We were going to talk about your book for a little bit.
Sure.
So we got it right here, The Dragon Traders, and then you had a second edition, which was, you were telling us is
there you go,
right there.
Cover. Yeah. I got that one. Eric has the other one, so we both got. Yeah, we both have copies.
So we have both.
Mine's back there, but yeah, we both have it in the library. So, I absolutely love the book because it was stories and stuff about the history. When you talk to herpers nowadays or new herpers, they kind of regurgitate the words and the names because that's how they've been trained. This is a Glen animal. Yeah, but you don't even know who that person is. Like, you don't even know why you're saying this, or but you should. And I like that because that kind of brings it full circle that you can learn about some of these things and why we say this, where this came from, how we all got to where we are now, which I
absolutely
enjoy. Yeah.
I guess my question would be, how did the process start? Like,
that,
what made you want to do basically a history of herpetoculture?
Okay, so it started growing up in Florida, going to these animal dealers. Number one, some great memories. I just to see your first puff adder or your first a cage full of pancake tortoises, and this is the days when there was nothing but wild caught.
Yeah.
And just I'd go to Charles Chase Company, and he'd let me loose in his reptile room, and here I was like 10 years old, and there's puff adders and gaboon vipers behind these little cages. I've never been that close to anything venomous, and so and a vat full of Suriname toads and redfoot and yellowfoot tortoises out in the pens, and seeing ostriches, people working with ostriches way out in the distance. And so when I moved up to Canada in the 90s, I got to I talked to a few of the keepers up there, and they told me about their experiences. Like, they would show me some jumping vipers, for instance, and they said, this came from the shed. And I said, hey, I've been to the shed, or this came from Tom Crutchfield. Hey, I've been to Tom Crutchfield's. And so that's how it started. And I started to mimeograph or make Xerox copies of their price lists. I never saved anything as a kid.
Right.
And I started saving price lists too. And so years went past, and in the early 2000s, I just decided, even if it's just posterity purposes, someone should record this stuff. We're not talking about these great pillars of society here. We're not talking about World War II history, but there should be a history recorded somewhere, because otherwise it's just word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be written down, and it should be centralized into maybe one volume or something, instead of just an article here and an article there in a magazine.
Right.
And so that's how I started. And so I started talking to people, and just they would put me in touch with another person. I talked to Craig Trumbauer, for instance, and he put me in touch with Gary Kiesler out in California, and a couple other people. And so I started to branch out and eventually started recording some of the conversations we had about their times working for this dealer or that dealer. Mm-hmm. And I talked to Ralph Curtis, who ran a reptile company in Florida called Wild Cargo. And Ralph, he had all this great history of Everglades Wonder Gardens, where he used to work as a kid or as a young man, and just all this history. And I said, someone should record this. And Ralph was working on a book at that time, and he was taking his time at it. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. But he just gave me all this information, and so it's just word of mouth and hooking up with people. And I started recording, writing it down. I didn't know where I was going with it at first, and I thought, well, let me just start with the present day dealers and work myself back. And I started going to newspaper archive services. So I'd look back at 1900, for instance, and I found out about these dealers I never had heard before. Nobody else had heard about these, but there was dealers back 120 years ago. It was all these people. And I thought, well, it'd be cool to record sort of a history of people back then and people in the mid 1900s and later 1900s, and try to put it all together. And things have changed immensely since, the first reptile show, which I found out, was in 1898. And you're thinking like, wow, it's my first reptile show. One of the first was Breeders' Expo in Orlando in the 90s. And and really the modern day reptile show started in the late 80s in Ohio in Columbus, Ohio. But I mean, who would have thought reptile shows were 1898? In 1899, there was another one. In 1936, there was another big one. These were all in New York City. And the first reptiles amateur group that was put together was in 1916. It was, this is way before the TV, internet, and anything else. But 1916, who would have thought that first albino boa appeared at that first reptile show in 1898? 1898, the first albino boa. And of course,
Wow.
this is way before people were breeding them. And,
Right.
but there was somebody who brought an albino boa to be shown to, the scores of people that would come into the show. And anyway, so I thought it was really interesting. And so I started putting stuff together. And I found out so much. Like, have you heard of Joe Laszlo?
Yeah.
He was a curator down in San Antonio. He brought to the attention of herpetoculturists the use of probing in snakes. And so, and this is like mid 70s. But one thing I found out through reading through herp journals that probing actually started in 1933. I mean, there was 2 articles in 1933 about probing snakes. Frank Blanchard, a herpetologist from the University of Michigan, came out with one of the articles, and another guy came out with another article. Probing snakes in 1933. UV lighting. Yeah, UV lighting is another thing that Joe Laszlo is famous for trying to put forth and push forward in the herpetoculture community. But they used UV lighting in New York, in the New York Zoo and New York Aquarium in 1925, I found. And, who would have thought? I thought it was invented in 1970 or something.
Yeah. It's not a new concept. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found out all this stuff, and it's just so cool. And, we try to reinvent history all the time, but history is there. It's a study of change over time, but I mean, it's if someone, I think it should be recorded. And so you can't always rely on today's internet, and because you have good stuff and you have bad stuff. You have really great information and you don't. And so I think, and I wanted to do a book, and I thought it would be great to do as a book. And
yeah. Much needed in herpetoculture, like you're saying. There's so many crazy things that you would never think,
I talked. Most everything I got was, or half of what I got, I should say, were firsthand accounts of people reminiscing back. Oh, this is how it started. Mm-hmm. I was trying to get as many firsthand accounts as possible, because after it's filtered through a few people, changes from, in 1975 I caught a 5-pound bass. Now it's suddenly turned into a 15-pound bass.
Right.
So I tried to do that and tried to access as much written information as possible, even though written information is not always true, but and especially from newspapers. But I mean, you had to start somewhere, and it's just really interesting to find out all these things that existed. And it just wasn't invented in the last 30 years. It's been over 100 years here in the U.S. and even longer in Europe.
It's so weird because, like we said earlier, that like Eric and I both growing up in the Philadelphia area, a lot of it is in there, and there's a lot of stuff that happened there. And then also with talking about shows and having the Hamburg Reptile show, that it's been around for ever, and it's full of old school herpers and stuff like that. It's like it's cool to kind of peek behind and see the stories behind it all. So,
but things have vastly changed with herpetoculture. In this 1970, for instance, 1.7 million reptiles were imported into the U.S. And by 1995, that was up to 2.5 million. And a million of those were iguanas. And back in 1970, 1.7 million, 1.2 million of that were red ear sliders, or South American sliders. So it was always one main animal
thing.
Yeah. But I mean, the greatest change I've seen is it used to be all wild caught, and now it's mostly all captive born. I mean, I do believe in having wild caught to resupply bloodlines and things like that, or to offer new opportunities to other people who want to work with a new species that hasn't been worked with. But I mean, it's really changed a lot, and the wild caught trade has immensely dropped off. Though it was 2.5 million in 1995, but by in between 2001 2012, it's fallen off 71%. And that's quite a lot. And the biggest change though has been the U.S. used to import all this stuff. Now we export, and so I had and it's all captive born stuff, and so. In 2009, I've got this figure here. Approximately 900,000 reptiles were imported into the U.S., but 11.3 million were exported. And
Wow.
and you would never think that, but it's it's changed completely, and it's the world is shrinking, in size because we have instant access to someone in New Guinea and Australia,
yeah.
and so it's and overpopulation. We have all these problems in the world, and so it's great to have captive born animals. That's like the biggest change I've seen.
It really is, and I have enjoyed that. It seems like more and more people are maybe, instead of just like factory breeding mutations and stuff like that, they also have a couple of the weird rare stuff that they're fiddling around with to see if they can establish it or if they can breed it. So, and I enjoy that more. So,
is there in those early days, you're saying about how the 1 million was iguanas and the other one was the painted turtles. Is that how they would come in, like only a limited amount of species, or would the rest of the the group that's getting imported, would they be just a mix of?
It would be a mix. When in the early 70s in Florida, I used to see a lot of side neck turtles, so Podocnemus, Uniphilus, and Expansa in pet stores and in dime stores, $3 little turtles, side neck turtles. And we used to see the Colombian slider, and that was when I was talking about the large portion of those animals were turtles that were imported. It was a large portion of those were Colombian sliders, really super colorful animals that looked more colorful than a red ear slider that you get here.
Gotcha.
And but yeah, there would be a mix of stuff. Everything that I remember as a kid, most everything was Latin American stuff from South America and Central America. And Colombia was still open for export, so a lot of the animals we had were from Colombia, and less so. But it's changed over time. Africa has been a big importer, especially with the ball python craze.
Sure.
And Asia has taken over certain aspects of certain other animals. But it's been a varied amount of different species that have come in.
Okay.
Do you think it was kind of like, further back, mentioning iguanas and Colombia with boas and, water turtles and like sliders, was it kind of all maybe geared towards what you'd find in a pet store, not really just geared towards anything else? And do you think they kind of shied away from that? Because I know I know that a lot of sliding turtles are now like a problem in certain areas and stuff like that, where they shouldn't be. So I think maybe they kind of backed away from that too a little bit.
Yeah, it was mainly geared towards the pet trade.
Okay.
And the red ear sliders, for instance, I think 5% of all houses owned a red ear slider in the 1960s and 70s. And they were found in every dime store, every little corner grocery or whatever have you. And the pet store I used to go to, called Pet Circus in Florida, was probably 2 blocks from my house. And I'd walk in there. I would just remember these big Colombian boas in these cages and redfoot tortoises and things like that. And so most everything that was imported was geared towards the pet market. Really, there wasn't breeding really. It's just the odd breeding now and then. Like I said, I bred corn snakes in '73, but who else was breeding stuff? There was other people breeding, but it wasn't like commonplace.
Right.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid growing up. I was born in 1974. So just to give you reference, but when I was growing up, it was kind of like I didn't hear anybody ever talk about breeding. Obviously, there wasn't a whole lot of reptile people that you would talk to, but like you're saying, you would go to like a local pet shop or something, and you never heard anybody say about, I want to get a male and a female and breed. I didn't,
Yeah, absolutely not. I remember when I hatched those corn snake eggs, I had a friend that he wanted to take a ride up to Thompson Wild Animal Farm in Clewiston on our 10-speed bikes, and but there was few and far between. I would estimate in the U.S. in 1970 there might have been a couple 100,000 reptile enthusiasts, and that includes everybody who just got a box turtle and put it in a cage to maybe more serious people.
Right.
And it's just, I think the last figures I read is like 4.8 million people are into reptiles now.
Yeah.
And so it's grown immensely, and I didn't know anybody. Like I said, I hung around high school friends who used to go out fishing and would catch the occasional snake, and I didn't hang out at the shed with Rob Roy and various other Louis Porras and I used to go down to the shed when they were around, but in Miami. But I didn't hang around reptile people, and so it was really, I guess it was a tight knit community amongst reptile people. But I mean, for the most part, the average person like me, I didn't know anybody else doing it.
Right.
And to have it go from that to like going to the Daytona Breeding Expo and stuff like that, where it's lined up around the block to get into the friggin' place. It's like that is a big change. So
yeah, it's absolutely a change. I've been to 2 reptile shows in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I went to Little Rock Reptile Show, the Show Me Reptile Show, and then I went to one in San Antonio just 2 days ago. And for the most part, everything is now kind of categorized into ball pythons and crested geckos, and there's nothing wrong with that, believe me, because it's all part and parcel of the trade. And without ball pythons, without some of the more popular species, we wouldn't have some of the equipment that we have, and the caging and food diets and all this other stuff that, and legal representation and laws and stuff like that. We have more people behind us to work with it. But back in the day, it was very few people. And, it's few and far between.
Yeah, you were almost an outcast if you.
Oh, that's why I was, because I actually did not let my neighbors know I had snakes. I mean, forget it.
I don't tell mine. Like,
I live on a couple acres, and so I don't really have a lot of close neighbors or anything like that. They'd probably shoot them down here in Texas if they saw a snake. But I mean, but everybody was afraid of snakes back then, so it was best just to say nothing and not come out with your boa constrictor around your neck. And I know a lot of people that do that, but I mean, still.
There's always that one person who's like, I let the retic outside in the front yard for sun. You're just asking for attention at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, when I was in Florida, I left in 83, 84 to go to school in Chicago. And this is before the Burmese pythons got loose in the glades. But we still had all this other stuff. We had walking catfish, which came from South America. And so it's really weird to go fishing and see this catfish come out of the water and start walking. And we had all these little tropical fish and cichlids and things like that. And so Florida was ruined such a long time ago. And now I'd hate to move back down there today just because of how bad it was in the 80s. And it's just tenfold now, encroachment.
All this stuff that's not supposed to be there, encroachment. Turning wildlife areas into golf courses. Like it's so.
Yeah, but anyway.
Sorry, Florida.
Do you have any thoughts on why such a boom in the people keeping reptiles in the U.S.?
Oh yeah. I think it was slowly building up. So in the 1980s, there was more and more breeders, especially people I was familiar with out in California, like Gary Sipperly or Bob Applegate or Frank Reedus or Ruiz, or there's a whole bunch of people, Lloyd Lemke, and so it's slowly growing. And so by the late 80s, I think there's several factors. I think the Vivarium coming out in 88, the first issue, 88 to 89. Reptile and Amphibian came out at the same time, the little magazine. You had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the movies. That came out, and that was a big boom to the turtle industry.
Turtles,
Then you had Jurassic Park, where there's these giant dinosaurs, and of course, dinosaurs aren't reptiles, but I mean they're very, you think of reptiles when you see dinosaurs. And so you had all this influence and just bombardment of stuff, and then people started to breed this stuff, and it got to be known that some of the more rarer species were being bred, like Dick Gergen breeding blackhead pythons and Don Hamper breeding Timor pythons, and just all this rare stuff. And ultimately, it's not all that hard to do. There are some tricky animals, but I mean, I'm just saying that ultimately, it's just you follow a steady course of between light cycles and cooling down and conditioning your animals, and it seems like we've advanced so much, but I mean that was the trigger in the 90s. All those little things that just came together as one big storm, and we just had the perfect storm, and it just grew. And the Breeders Expo in 1990, when it came, it blew the top off the lid off the top, and you had all these nowadays it's just there's very there's very few animals that I would suspect that aren't being bred in captivity. You know, I mean, Komodo dragons, not in the private sector at least.
Right.
Right.
Owen Kellys, they are in the private sector. I mean, some parts of the world.
Right. Right.
But I mean, it's pretty easy, and then all the colors. I think the morph market. I'm a locality guy, and so I go for the basic phenotype of how the animal looks. I look for, yes, I like Okatee corn snakes, but it's a locality. I don't. I'm not a big. I had my first albino corn snake in 1981, and but I'm not big into albinos. And but I think people are now experimenting with the colors, or they had been doing so beginning in the 90s, breeding this to that. And by the early 2000s, when the ball python thing just all came together, and it's just, you know, it's another factor or part of the trade. And it's just, you know, I think a lot of people, it's not strictly commerce either. I think I do it. I'm a hobbyist, and my hobby supports what I breed supports my hobby.
My hobby.
Right.
Yep.
But, yeah. But I mean, some people look at it as commerce. It's not all commerce though. And I think that's a big difference in today's world versus when I was growing up. We were all considered sort of amateur herpetologists back then. And because we had these books by these famous people and this decent sized libraries and things like that. Today, I think it's mainly the books have gone out the window for the most part, or a big deal of the younger crowd, and they're strictly off living off the internet and podcasts and feeds and stuff like that.
I say the most important table at a reptile show is the book table.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the fun. That's the best one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As you can see behind me and Owen and behind you, I see all the
absolutely, you know? And I don't even have a big collection. I mean, I've been to some. I went to the Royal Ontario Museum and went into the Robert Murphy's collection. He was, I mean, it was a room twice as big as mine, just filled wall to wall with books. And I just, you know, you can't. The prices went up immeasurably, and I've yet to go out to Bob Ashley's library out.
It's huge.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But I've heard how he you know, he got some of Craig Adler's old volumes and just you know, so I can't wait to go out there.
It was big. We were out there when he was still kind of building the library part, but he had all the books in like an office, and it was like floor to ceiling. Every single wall, and it was just like, oh, and so that was.
I've been in his office where it's all stacked up, and and that's one of the things I'm proud of Bob, actually, because I mean he's been a great promoter of herpetoculture and herpetology too. They have so many conferences out there, and it's, you know, Chiricahua. How can you not want to go there and
this is great.
And herp, you know?
Yeah,
fantastic.
But Chiricahuas have a great history with Carl Caulfield and Gloyd, and various herpetologists went down there, and that's how I feel in Texas here when I go out west to the Davis Mountains or Big Bend or something. I think about, you know, Carl Caulfield probably went down this road and caught a
that was yep.
And so I think about history all the time.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's cool.
That's a good part of it.
Yeah, I miss West Texas, don't you, Owen? Don't you want to go back?
I do, but because I think when we went to West Texas, it got unusually cold at night. Yeah. So pretty much it was us and the cold. That's right.
You were on the first
in
trip.
the millipede. Yeah, I was on the bad trip where it was us in the millipedes and nothing else on the cut. And I'm like, that's enough of this. So
I'm only 2 hours away from Del Rio. That's a gateway.
Nice.
To Gray Band. Juneau Road's probably maybe 2.5, 3 hours from my house, and
that's awesome.
And also living in San Antonio, you just go 2 to 3 hours south of here, you get into Mexican milk snake territory, and And I remember cruising a lot of South Texas roads and just finding 30 Atrox in the night, and it's just cool, to get them off the road, or even if they're dead on the road, just get them off the road and stuff. And but it's cool to see all that stuff. And going out west is a little bit more sparse, not as thick as South Texas, but it's cool, a cool place to live. And so I think that's one of the things that a lot of herpers, especially the people that go to shows, should start doing more of is field collecting, and not collecting, but going out in the field, because a lot of people live by deli cup to deli cup, and I think they're missing a big part of this. Of what it means to be a herper or amateur herpetologist. And when I say amateur herpetologist, it just means that I've read some books and stuff like that. But they're missing a big part of what it is to be a herper.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for me, when I was in and out of reptiles, but when I got back into it, I kind of got sucked into the morph thing, right? The whole albinos and this and that and all this stuff, right? But it wasn't until I went and saw speckled rattlesnakes in the wild.
Oh yeah.
That I had this new appreciation for the wild phenotype of an animal because of it blending into the background.
It's supposed to disappear.
That it's supposed to disappear into, So when you have something like an albino and you're keeping in a like say your basic reptile cage, and you have like a basic, maybe you have paper on the bottom or something, the thing that's popping out in that cage is the color of the animal. But when you're seeing it in the wild, you're like getting the whole thing, I guess,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's very, so you caught, it was a Pyrus or the Southwest speckled rattlesnake?
Yeah.
Is that what you found? Okay. Yeah. Was it the white form or the orange ones?
Orange ones.
Orange ones. So it's probably north of Phoenix or.
I think so. Yeah. I don't remember exactly where, but yeah.
Yeah, I remember finding my first sidewinder out there. Just it's so cool. And then I've yet to find a rosy boa, and I haven't really searched that hard for rosy boa.
Everybody we talk to is like, I'll call really good herpers. They're like, we would love to find a rosy boa, but they're like, but I haven't found one. I'm like, I don't think they exist anymore. Like, where are the rosy boas? Like,
you gotta hang out with Randy Lindbergh or people.
Okay, gotta go to the right person.
Yeah. Craig Crumbauer, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the book Dragon Traders, I was curious, is this something that you're going to do another volume to at some point? I mean, I imagine that it's amazing.
Yeah.
Stories building,
but
it took me 6 years to do the Dragon Traders.
Oh, wow.
It just, it's hard to work on I'm not a natural writer either. It's hard to, and you're working all day long, and, you might do a little bit, once or twice a week, but it took six years. So the last 5 years I've been working on volume 2. And, and so I'm almost done with it, but it's a standalone book on the history of herpetoculture. Nice. It's not going to be about the reptile trade per se. It's going to be about herpetoculture. So I start out with some of the monumental herpetologists and the academics that helped establish herpetology in North America. And I talk about expeditions going out to the West, and some of these naturalists finding some of the first rattlesnakes, the first tiger rattlesnake, the first sidewinder. I talk about that. And I talk about early reptile keepers, the things I mentioned earlier about their early reptile shows in the U.S. And the first reptile keepers in the U.S. were actually people who had exhibits, early menageries and things like that back in the late 1700s. And how far? So I have a chapter on that, and I have a chapter on the golden age of herpetoculture, which is a term coined by Dave Barker, the golden age of herpetoculture. And it basically means about 1960 something to where we're at now. And it's about the beginning of modern herpetoculture, when we started to learn how to breed, we learned how to cool snakes and probe snakes and do all these wonderful things. And so I've got a couple more chapters in that, but it's so 5 years in the making. It's going to be roughly about a 350 page volume. And it's I've tried to include biographies, and that's one of the things I wanted to do in Dragon Traders, and I had 550 pages in Dragon Traders, and I had to cut it down by 50 or 60 just to get it under 500.
Wow.
And so this time I've got like 40 biographies, and these are some of the monumental people, and some people that were so monumental, but they had interesting stories. I have like Dean Ripa, and he was first private keeper to breed black-headed bushmasters and stenopheres, the Central American bushmaster. And I got to meet Dean. He came by the Dallas Zoo when I was working there, and I got to show him the chamber where we bred bushmasters for the very first time in captivity in 1987. and he wanted to see it, and so I got to see it. And I also found out the dean was a singer, and he was on a big band tour at that time. He came through Dallas. He had like a big band. He was like Tommy Dorsey, you know, I mean, just all this crazy stuff. And he invited me back to his place, and I got to visit the his serpentarium or his reptile display in Wilmington, which is, man, it was like better than a zoo. At least I thought so. And to see, he had crate after crate of Bushmasters. I've never seen that many Bushmasters. We had 20 at best at Dallas, and that's about 5 or 6 adults and a whole bunch of babies.
Yeah.
He had 20 adults, you know, I mean,
Jesus.
you know, and it's just, you know, he'd have them in these big cages, but he also had them in Tupperware, you know, just because he these big ass Tupperwares.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I wanted to do it. He got, unfortunately, he got murdered in 2017, I think. But I wanted to record his story. And some of these other people, and these Joe Laszlo or Bern Bechtel was the first person who bred albino corn snakes. I wanted to record his story.
Yeah.
And so that's what the new volume is going to encompass, about maybe 40 or so biographies. And even in the zoo chapter I have biographies of the keepers. Most zoo people who cover zoos is mainly about the curators, but I wanted to cover some of the keepers, like Trooper Walsh who at the National Zoo was first person, I think, private person to breed green tree pythons,
right?
And Komodo dragons, and so I thought it was important to cover some of these people. And so I'm hoping to get it ready for publication by late this year and early next year.
Awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
That'd be cool. I can't wait for that. That would be fun.
Yeah. So, you know, it's funny. I specifically do this kind of with pythons, specifically carpet pythons. I kind of have been tracking the history of the carpet python hobby since, like, I don't know, what would you say? Oh, in
since we started
2001, I think.
2000, yeah. You have copies of everybody's websites that used to be up, like Xerox copies of them all. So
and now all that information is gone. You know,
absolutely.
With Morelia breeders in particular, a lot of people like to do like lineage charts, you know, whether it's green trees or carpets, and they have, like, you know, green trees are really the people that have Trooper Walsh, right, is one of the guys that have been doing it forever. But you think about their lineage that goes back to like the 70s in the Philadelphia Zoo, some of their animals that I don't know. I think that's pretty cool that if you can have an animal that's been bred, you know, that many generations back in captivity is pretty neat. I think that's pretty awesome that you're putting the people, because I don't know, I like those stories. I think when I listen to a podcast, I want to hear more of those stories about, you know, what people have experienced in herpiculture. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
You know, that's one of the things it's unfortunate in the reptile trade, is that we don't keep a history. Very few people keep records of who they got it from and where this lineage came from. Like with the annulated bows that I have, I can go back maybe 1 or 2 generations on some of my animals, but I mean, I can't go back to the very first person who had them, or my Sanzinia. I have zero. I know who I got them from. I know who someone else got them from, but I don't know who had them before them, you know. So that's one thing we're very poor in herpetoculture, in most groups at least, is keeping a lineage of I wish people had kept better records and some pedigree over where this animal came from. And they're doing it, like you said, in green tree pythons, but not so much in other groups. And
you don't see, like, the ball python industry is not keeping a, you know, and I guess to a certain extent I understand it, but I guess the way my brain works is that, like, I still want to know the story of behind the animal, you know, like, where did it come from, who bred it, who was involved, you know. I don't know.
Like Honduran milk snakes. There's a pretty good book on Honduran milk snakes. It came out maybe a dozen years ago or so, and it talks a little bit about the history, but they're all, you know, people have I think to me, they've ruined the Honduran milk snake, because they've put so many different genes, and you can't go to an expo without picking up a normal looking Honduran milk snake without it being anarthristic, without albino genes, without tangerine genes, and what have you. And it'd be nice to have some kind of pedigree. but we're doing this for fun, and it's
Yeah.
one of those things. In zoos, they have records, of where these animals came from. But I mean, in the private sector, not so much.
Yeah.
I think it's something I said, like I used to say years ago, is go to a reptile show and find me a normal leopard gecko, like a spotted leopard gecko, the one that the reason they have the name leopard, and you couldn't. And then they started bringing over new localities of leopard geckos from different countries, and people are like, it's so cool. I'm like, that's what they're supposed to look like. This isn't new. It's just back to what it used to be.
Well,
so
everything's like a
full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back around. And, and so anyway, but there's good things about morphs, and there's I think it's the more the merrier to me. And I think people should stop the commerce thing. Kind of it advances the hobby tremendously, but it also detracts from the hobby. I think people should do what they love to do, and and maybe keep those normal leopard geckos in the hobby. And,
maybe don't have to morph everything. I used to
say
it's okay to have this pure animal and then make sure you breed it with another pure animal. But then if you want to experiment, that's fine, but make sure the pure stuff still happens too. Otherwise, we can very easily lose a species, a locality, something very easily.
Right.
Sure. So, yeah. With dealing with some of the, more obscure pythons that we've experienced, sometimes, you don't know if they're ever going to be imported again. I think of like Halmahera scrub pythons, which have only been bred a couple of times, but, if somebody was really into that species, I think that they should be able to get it because somebody put the work into it. I think you're right that the idea that people get caught up on this idea of making all this money from breeding and they don't do what they love, they do what they think is going to sell at the reptiles table. And, I think that what I try to preach to people is like, you talk about, we call them West Pop and carpet pythons, but back in the day, nobody cared about them. They only cared about jungle carpets because of how they look.
Pretty.
And I just stayed my course with the brown dirt snakes. And, but the idea that you could selectively breed them for, to make them prettier and bring out this yellow or bring out the, a tan or whatever.
Copper.
That there was a lot of potential there to make nicer and nicer animals if you just, refine certain things, and I think just because I was excited about it, other people got excited about it. And I think that's what people miss. Like if you're excited about something, you're going to get people into it. There's going to be people that get excited about it too.
Yeah. There are going to be other people there.
Yeah.
It's not all about commerce. You should follow your passion. And it doesn't necessarily mean, there's, and I also, one of the advices I'd give to young people is to concentrate on smaller groups of certain groups of animals. You don't need a postage stamp collection of 50 different species. Just, concentrate on a few core species and be as good as you can with those core species and try to get them to breed. And
we've even talked about, as far as like depending on where you're from, sort of thinking about it in terms of what animal, like for instance, if you live in the desert, it's going to be a little bit difficult to keep a green tree python
or diamonds.
I'm not saying that you could or you can't. You can, but it's not going to be as easy as somebody that's in Texas, that somebody that may be, in Florida is going to have an easier time because they have the humidity on their side, and they don't have those high temperatures and stuff.
Well, that's the case. I moved down here to Texas from Ontario, and I was breeding my emerald tree bows up in Ontario. I came down here and they fell apart. I started having all these problems. It's a drier, we're 50, 60, 70% humidity down here versus maybe more where you're at, maybe, I don't know if it's 70. It's a lot more humid.
70, 80.
We're not desert though, but we're close to being desert. And so my emerald tree bow started doing really terrible. And so what did I do? I got annulated bows. I don't know why, but and I got basins and stuff like that. And now they're all doing good though. But I mean, I just you have to look at where you live and what species will do good. I mean, one of the more successful basin breeders is out in Colorado, and Colorado's dry as a bone.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm just saying that, like, you know,
it helps.
It helps.
Mother Nature
helps,
can
absolutely.
help you or hurt you. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sure.
Maybe I should stay it from this standpoint, right? We've talked to a lot of people about breeding snakes on this podcast for the past 13 years, right? So what I've noticed over that time is, like, you know, certain people will breed a carpet python one way on the Northeast and a different way in the Southwest. And it's not that they're, you know, they're just responding to different triggers, if you will, or they're doing something different in their room to help overcome those, you know, whether it's drier climate or whatever it would be. You know?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it helps. It definitely helps. It's like the Sanzinia that I mentioned earlier. Is some people would bring them down into the 50s, and mine bred this year. I barely brought it down in the 60s, and that's what I was told by Ricky Lockett, who's been super successful with them. And you know, but I think maybe certain lineages need more stimulation. It might just be, like you said, where you live, though, too. You know, little things you don't see.
Sure. Yeah. So what do you think of the hobby now, as opposed to, you know, being able to see sort of, you have a unique perspective where you've researched, you know,
all of it,
the whole thing. Do you see it going in a positive direction? Do you see it, you know, I seem to think that there's a trend where people are moving towards keeping smaller groups, better caging, and more unique animals.
I think that's true. I think with all I think the positive changes have been all the herp caging and accessories and that have come along, and diets and things like that, and the years of keeping these expansive collections. I think if you're a commercial breeder, you have to have a big collection. But I mean, if I think smaller collections and being more in tune with what you're seeing behavior-wise with your animals, and that's what I do with my eyelash vipers. I go out at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night and watch them. I had a pair breeding last night, and the female, when they lock up, the female drags the male all over the cage. And you know, just like hemi beams.
Oh no!
Wow. Yeah, and I'm looking at this, and she's crawling through this bromeliad that has all these spikes on it. I'm saying, "Oh man, this is not good." But no, he put up with it, and as I would probably too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But I mean, yes.
What was your feeling the first time you saw that go? Did you know that was going to happen, or?
Well, I mean, and that's where with the venomous snakes, I see more of that, the females dragging the male around more so than the boids are just kind of wrapped around and just doing their thing. But I think the females grow tired in the venomous snakes and say, "Let me get out of here," and, you know.
Right.
But but the positives, I think that the smaller groups, I think and being able to pay attention to certain groups that we never paid attention to before, you know, like I wish I had those dwarf bows back that I sold back in close to 25 years ago.
Right.
I can't get them anymore. So, I mean, you have to be more attuned with some of the animals that are very rare in captivity, and with the advances that we've seen, I mean, it's just specialization in certain groups of animals and smaller groups, and I think that's it's a positive thing in the herp community.
Yeah. Okay. Where's the most exciting place you've herped?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I haven't been to a lot of places. Peru was pretty exciting.
That's cool.
And, you know, it's swimming in a tributary of the Amazon. I just kept on thinking, are the piranhas going to get me now? And, no, we're on
any minute now.
Well, I swear, we were trying to get some information about Dracaena, or the, what's it called? Dracaena guianensis. It's an aquatic lizard that I forget what the common name is.
I forget.
They have an orange head with a green body, but they're aquatic. And so, you know, we'd see one or two, and you dive in the water, not dive in the water, just slowly go in the water, but you'd hit an underground like log or something. You always think about black caiman and piranhas and things like that.
Yeah.
And so Peru was pretty cool. Peru was cool in that I lifted a log and I found a Hyaprora, I forget the species name, but it's a little hognose viper that very rarely people see.
Right.
To find a Teniata, a speckled forest pit viper that a little kid brought in a bottle. He knew what we brought down with us is T-shirts, old T-shirts, and they wanted with little logos on them, and they wanted the local population would trade you snakes. But I felt so bad about the venomous snakes coming in with little kids handling them, and just it's not a good thing. But it was really cool to be there. I've been to Costa Rica a few times on the Caribbean side, and that was pretty cool too, to come across like a 2 meter long terciopelo, or sometimes called a fer-de-lance, and just right in the middle of your path at night. I was leading a group of roughly 8 people, and this big, I mean, it was the biggest one I've ever seen. We came across little 4 or 5 footers, but this one was huge, and it stood its ground. It started thrashing around, and so it was really cool to see that.
Yeah.
So those were the two. I've been to Anegada and Virgin Island, in the Virgin Islands, and I went with somebody who was studying the iguanas there, the Cyclura, and that wasn't quite as exciting, but it was cool to be on the beach and eating lobster every night. And, but I mean, I think Peru is probably the place to be, and to see you see military everywhere. At least I did, with these little automatic weapons and stuff. You always like, okay,
right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it was just to see that, and to walk into the market in the Iquitos, and you see yellowfoot tortoises that were being sold for food. I felt bad about.
Yeah.
And we ate the local fish every night. We had to cook the fish, and so I had all kinds of fish, and it was pretty cool. But almost stepped on a Atrox, a Bothrops Atrox there. I did a Bill Lamar, and Bill Lamar is known for going out in the tropics with flip-flops on. And so I put my flip-flops on. I was just walking the perimeter of this camp that we were at, and I almost stepped on it because they blend perfectly into the surroundings, and it's coiled up, and I didn't see it until the last minute. And so after that, I never wore my flip-flops.
Yeah. Boots are good. Yeah.
Yeah. But those are about the things, just coming across something you never saw before. Tamandua and howler monkeys and all kinds of just stuff that you never saw before. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I don't know. I always say that it's, I don't know. There's just something about being in that environment where you're so far away from I don't know. It just resets me, It's just,
yeah. Absolutely. Yep. I brought my wife with me in 2000, and she'll never go back again because it wasn't it wasn't the beach, And she said next time I'm going to go to so we roughed it in this camp that there's cots and stuff like that. And it was no air conditioning and stuff. And that's like the last vacation she wanted to go on. That's the last time we went on vacation, actually. Is
Is there a place that you haven't gone that you would really love to check off the list and go herping?
Yeah, there's a lot of places. I mean, Australia is one of them. And, that was on my list in the 80s, and it just never worked out. It just it came down to monetary. Sometimes it came down to just getting time off and episodes in life in general.
Sure.
So that's one place I'm not too excited about. Africa, not really excited about. I'd like to go down to South America again. Galapagos are always on my list. And so
Madagascar to see those Sanzinia.
Madagascar, yeah, absolutely. To see radiated tortoises and brown boas and Sanzinia, all the chameleons and leaf-tailed geckos and things like that. Living up in Ontario was really cool because you guys are probably more used to this, but to see spotted turtles in the springtime. And one day I went out into this bog, and I swear to God, I saw at least walking across the ground in this bog, at least a dozen spotted turtles. And then this other spot had all these wood turtles and Massasaugas and things like that, fox snakes. And that was pretty cool to live up there.
I really dig fox snakes. I don't know why. Something about their color and pattern. I mean, I know it's just a rat snake, but I don't know. They're just really cool looking.
Oh yeah, the eastern
Yep.
ones are especially with the orange.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
found one along the shores of Lake Erie up there, and it was gravid. So a friend of mine secretly kept it until it laid eggs and let it go and hatch the eggs and let those babies go. But that was the coolest moment
That's
in
cool.
my life. Also, a smooth green snake. I never
Yep.
saw a smooth green snake. I'm used to rough green snakes down south, but never saw a smooth. And another friend of mine found the smooth green snake. We were walking this trail. It was right in the middle of the trail, and it was gravid too. So he brought it home, hatched the eggs. The eggs hatched like in just days. I mean, it wasn't
Really?
like this long 60 days.
Okay.
And he let the babies go, but it's cool to see stuff like that.
Yeah, that is
That's
cool.
awesome. He doesn't even have to feed or keep. Or
Yeah,
anything.
no,
He
just
just
off
brings
you
the
go,
snakes
yeah.
home, gets some eggs, hatches them
Yeah.
out,
Yeah,
lets them go
well,
again.
absolutely. And that's what
That's
I'm
awesome.
looking at. That's what I'm looking at where I live now. I see coral snakes, and I just want to find one coral snake that is gravid, so I can
Right.
let it
Hatch the
lay the
babies.
eggs, let it go. I just want to hatch in these little babies, and
Yep.
just to hatch them and let them go again. And I live on a property that I see a coral snake about every once a year, not too often, but I mean, you see them after the rains, and we have occasional Western Diamondbacks down here too on my property. I
Mm.
saw a porcupine one time,
That's
ringtail cats and foxes and things like that. And it's very small, but they're building houses everywhere around me. So
Oh,
sooner
yeah.
or later, all this stuff's going to disappear.
Yeah.
But you're both from Philadelphia, and that's one of the at least for me, it was a mecca for spotted turtles and wood turtles and bog turtles in Lancaster County. And I used to read Carl Ernst's Turtles of the World or Turtles of the United States, and it was all his studies were done in Lancaster County, and that's just it's always held in my mind that that's probably a cool place to visit.
That's the saving grace of a lot of construction around me, because Eric's closer to Philadelphia than I am. I moved about an hour or so outside, but the reason a lot of places have not been developed is because when they do the survey, they find a bog turtle and then that's it. Can't touch it. We're done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's always the rumor that when you don't want, when the township doesn't want something to get built, they slip a bog turtle in there and then just kind of.
But you know, I was talking to Bill Zavicki, and Bill is a dentist in Connecticut, and he was the first person to breed radiated tortoises back in the early 70s, 73, 72, somewhere around there. And anyway, he was involved in bog turtle studies in Connecticut. And he said he found this one little remnant population that was on this ultra rich person's home. And they knew it was there, and they converted it into a fishing pond. And it basically wiped out. Then he found this other one that they built a mall right on top of the, and it's sad about some of those species. And
yeah, it is.
Yeah, we saw that when we went down to find the Florida pine snake, and
we see that here with our spot for timber rattlesnakes is it's an active clearing site.
And they just clear it out.
And every time we go, there's less and less woods up to where we go for the timbers, and it's like one of these times we're gonna come up there and it's not gonna be there. So
they're not protected in Pennsylvania, are they?
They are.
Oh,
they are. But where they're at, they're on top of this at one point it was a mountain, and then I think they also dumped a bunch of concrete stuff on top of it too, making it more of a rock facing kind of a deal. And there's some power lines and some other stuff, but there's also active trails. And then on the other side, it's like there's a road. One side is preserved, the other side is cleared. So they're just clear cutting. So I think it's only a matter of time before they either go across the street or they decide that this is the line, which when they start building stuff on one side of the road and then we find out rattlesnakes are on this side of the road, how long is that going to last? So
it's not going to.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll see.
Well,
now that I've depressed us all with that, yeah.
Oh, no, come
on. I guess in the as we get towards wrapping up, is there a species that you always wanted but never were able to get that maybe one day you would love to work with?
Yeah, how about Cropan's boa from Brazil?
Ooh.
I think it used to be Xenoboa cropani, then it's finally into Corallus cropani. Blomberg's, I'm into tree boa. So Blomberg's tree boa that occurs in Ecuador is another one. It used to be just an annulated boa, and trachea boa. And so when I worked at San Antonio, we had one trachea boa that we used to feed it fish and stuff. And I'd love maybe not keep it, but just to see them in the wild. Yeah, I don't really have this big list. As I get older, I'm in my 60s now, and I'm trying to pin down the collection. I used to want all these pit vipers and stuff, and I don't want to do that anymore. And I just, I'm keeping a set number of animals, so I don't really have this big list of animals that I need to get anymore. And I thought about mang vipers and
mangs,
I've always loved ring pythons, at least baby ring pythons. And,
yeah.
But I mean, but I have limited space, and so I really honestly don't have this list anymore. It's spotted turtles. I love spotted turtles. I saw them at the show this past week, and all these little babies, and I love this. My favorite turtle, but I just think about, by the time I raise it, I'm going to be so old, and I'm thinking, I saw radiated tortoises and star tortoises, and I said, by the time I raise that, so I think about some of those things about my own mortality, and I like to look at other people's successes though too.
Yeah. It's funny. Me and Keith talk about this all the time. It's like a progression in the herper's life, and you get into it, you're all excited about it, you have sort of the Noah's Ark type of scenario where you just have two of everything, and there's no rhyme or reason or whatever, and then you sort of like, you start to refine it and get into a specific group, and then you go herping, and then you start to stop keeping and more towards herping or seeing them in the wild or living through other people, or you still appreciate everything, but you just
I think that's a natural progression with many herpers is to see it in the wild and to get away from keeping them in captivity or keeping very few in captivity. It's always nice to mess around with something, and to have maybe one species or a few species. But I mean, and that's basically what I do. So I got under a dozen species, and I just it keeps me occupied. I retired 5 years ago, and retirement is great. I mean, I get to I mean, seriously, I get to go any place. I lose track of the days of the week now. I used to be up at 5 o'clock every morning, and I don't miss that at all. And
I can't wait.
And so I'm going out to the Chiricahuas in 2 weeks, and I just made that plan like 2 or 3 days ago. I said, let me go out to the Chiricahuas, and I'm going to hit the Davis Mountains on the way back. I've never found a gray banded king snake.
That's what's going to ask you. You've never found?
I've got to find a gray banded king snake. And
one mission right now is that. Yeah.
I went to Boy Scout Road in the Davis Mountains about a year ago.
Yeah.
And it was just all I saw was cattle on Boy Scout Road. I guess there's cattle guards that you cross over on the road that goes up there. And I ran into cattle, and I said, man, I'm not going to find a gray band here. I went all the way to the very end, came back down. And it was a little bit too early in the year. It was kind of cool. But I mean, so I'm going to go to the Davis Mountains. I'm thinking about going I was thinking about last week going out just to past Del Rio and to Juneau Road. But I've been skunked so many times out there. I can't tell you. I just don't have the gray band gods.
Gray band touch. Yeah.
Nor
do we.
Nope.
So many days I've been out there, I find one DOR or nights, I should say, or one Atrox or one, and anyway, so it's nice to be able to do that and go out when you want.
Yeah. Especially in Texas.
we found the Atrox on Boy Scout Road, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was just going to tell you that. That's
Atrox. I love seeing blacktails out there, and
I haven't seen a blacktail every time they go without me. Yeah,
those are pretty cool, and we have them around here, but very sparingly. And Lepidus are found one county over, the very first Lepidus closest to me, and but they're few and far between. They're all on private property, and it's hard to road cruise or do anything.
I think
They're
that's
all-
one of the struggles with Texas is that there's a
Oh,
lot
absolutely.
of private property.
Tons of private property.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I never road cruised in Florida, and I should have as a kid. But of course, as a kid, I didn't have a car. But I mean, we always went on property that there's no barbed wire fences or anything.
Right.
And so coming to Texas is a whole new, different experience. It's all road cruising for the most part. Going down south to South Texas or going west to West Texas, you have to hit those cuts that are next to the highway, and you got 40 feet of being able to look for herps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, you were talking about I'm just going to share this with you real quick, just because this is probably the nice lepidus I've ever seen. Oh, probably. Oh, wait, is it this?
Is it your lip?
Now I can't find the picture.
All right. So while Eric's looking for that, we're wrapping it up here for a little bit, but we do have a couple questions we'd like to kind of ask towards the end of it. Just kind of quick hitters. Is there a piece of advice that you could give somebody entering the hobby that you didn't have when you did?
There's a lot of advice, but no, I'm serious. And we've talked about some of the stuff. One thing is follow your passions. Don't go necessarily with, I've got to get an albino this or albino that. Look for animals that you have a kindred interest in. Like I had an interest in dwarf boas 35 years ago. And I'd said, this is a really cool snake to get. And so I think follow your passions and try to concentrate on, instead of having this big group, you want to have some variety. I understand that. But I mean, concentrate more on smaller groups of less species, and try to do the very best you can with those species. Get out in the field. I think that is one of the things that are missing from a lot of herpers that go out and to the shows, that they're just living by deli cup to deli cup. I mean, they have no field experience. It's so cool to see animals out in the wild. And so find a mentor, join your local herp group and find out when they go out in the field, or find somebody who can take you out to the field, because it's so cool to go out there and see a tree frog or a green snake or black rat snake or what have you, and just you get to learn so much, and you get to appreciate nature. And that's one of the things I think Carl Caufeld touched with a lot of people, is he would describe the habitat in his 2 books that he did, Snakes and Snake Hunting and Snakes the Keeper and the Kept. He would describe the owls and various things that you see in the wild. You don't see that at a herp show. No. And it's so cool to go out there. And so I think my advice is go out herping. There's herp spots everywhere, even if it's just a vacant lot next to your house. That's where I found a lot of snakes in Florida, just lifting up, in the vacant lots and stuff, lifting up a piece of cardboard and finding.
Set up tin, like you gotta,
yeah. So those things, and follow your passion. I think don't go necessarily with trends. Follow what you find interesting.
Yeah. I love it.
And then I guess the last one I got for you here is that you mentioned a couple names, but is there somebody who truly was your mentor who kind of took you under their wing, or were you just kind of a free range?
I'm a free range guy. No, I'm seriously, because I hung around nothing but high school friends as a kid. I never really got to meet all these people like Louis Porras. I at the shed and stuff. I never hung around that community. But I mean, Carl Caufeld's mentor, Raymond Ditmars, the father of North American herpetoculture, if you will. He just so the people. I'm kind of book smart type person, where I would read a lot, and those were my mentors. Now, I've met a lot of people along the way, like Tom Mason up in Ontario, Canada. I went to Costa Rica with him, and Tom wrestled bears when he was going to college in the 60s. This is back in the day when it wasn't looked at as frowned upon. But I mean, he wrestled bears, and he had all these great stories. But he was like the consummate. He's still alive, and he's in his 70s, and consummate naturalist. When you go out, he could describe anything, and and we caught our first. I remember Musarana. We went
Mm.
out on a night hike, and you know, I saw this big black snake. I didn't know what it was, and it's kind of swampy habitat. And I got a flashlight, and I'm thinking one of two things. I'm thinking of white-lipped python. Why white-lipped python in Costa Rica? I don't know. But that's what I saw, and I didn't want to grab it because I didn't know if But having Tom there, he grabbed it, and Musaranas don't bite, and so he grabbed this 6 foot long snake, and so he was kind of a mentor, and I gravitated towards people that could teach me stuff over the years, and so I didn't really have a true mentor, but it's a variety of reading books and then meeting people along the way.
Gotcha. Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
Very cool. So, I guess at this point, did you want to try to tell people where they can get a copy of The Dragon Trader, or where to keep an eye out for Volume 2?
Yeah, see the Dragon Traders here. You can get a copy at Eco Books out in the Rodeo online. You can go on Amazon.com. I'm sure Bob advertises on Amazon.com. And so the softbound have been sold out for a few years, but the I know he still has a few hardbacks available. And so Eco Books is probably the largest herp book dealer in the U.S.
I'd say so. Yeah.
And so and he's got so many new titles coming out, and so it's a place where you can get the Dragon Traders, and you should get it because I mean you'll learn so much about. You may not be interested in now, but I put these stories in there about. I had this one guy, Earl Turner, tell me about how this one herp dealer he's cut his teeth out in El Paso with Pancho Villa, and it was just all these crazy stories and stuff. And Earl used to tell a lot of tall tales, but I mean, there's a lot of stories in here that are interesting, I think, and you can get some background of where your hobby has come from. And,
yeah, that's what I like about it. So, and with Bob, and Eco getting more titles and stuff, I'm gonna need a bigger bookshelf, and I'm mad about that. So, but I'll deal with that later. That's.
I know I'm so full. I moved over to the side here.
Dude, I'm done. Like it's, I can't fit anymore. But
they people used to collect every single book that was out there, and. You should. I don't collect every book anymore. I collect the ones I'm interested in. If I'm interested in one group of snakes, that's the ones I'm going to collect, or one country or something. That's the ones I'm going to collect. And Bob has a vast variety of different books, and he's. I'm really happy over Bob's situation out there with he's given so much back to herpetoculture and herpetology too, where he has these conferences and he's making caps, and everybody seems to have a cap with the rattlesnake on it now.
Everybody seems to have one. Yeah.
And he sells to the National Park Service, and it's like so he's got this conglomerate, and he's doing really good. But he's giving back to the community too.
Yeah, it's very important. Yeah,
if you're in that area, I highly recommend stopping by his place out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great place.
All right, well,
is there anything else you wanted to toss out there? Website, anything, or
no, not really. I'm on Facebook, and I'm an administrator for the Old School Herp group, and in that Herp group we do discuss things like that are found in the Dragon Traders and various the history of herpetology and the history of herpetoculture. And so it's a Facebook community that's maybe 5,000 members or so, and so if you're interested you can join Old School Herpers.
Okay, cool. I will put all of those links in the show notes, so you can just click on it and I'll take you right to it. And
great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and
thanks, Michael.
hanging out with us.
It's nice hanging out with Eric and Owen and listening to your stories too, especially all those beer drinking stories I heard before we came on.
Yeah, those are the good ones. Yeah. We'll send all those other ones about Keith that we wanted to keep off air. We'll email you those later.
Yeah, I think his name came up for sure.
Yeah, he did. His name did come up once or twice. Yeah.
Oh man,
so that's cool. So I guess we'll close it.
Here.
Yeah, we'll
Thanks
definitely
very
have
much.
you swing back around and let us know when you get ready for the next book. You can come on and we'll talk about that
Code it
one.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you
very
Mike.
much, guys.
Yeah.
Have a good one. And I guess we're gonna close out. Eric, you want to just keep going through the whole thing?
Yeah.
right.
I'll do real quick. So for MPR, basically, you can follow us on social medias. We have the cold-blooded caffeine if you want some coffee that supports reptile habitat. That's
the MPR blend, carpets and coffee blend.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we also have our Teespring store, and we have the Patreon, which I would say we don't have the website anymore. So I'm going to start transferring all of the stuff that we had on the website of the carpet python history to the Patreon.
Do that.
And we're going to put it up there for free members. So if you want to join, you don't have to pay any money. You can join as a free member.
Some people were asking me about past episodes that they can't have access to because they're trying to find them. Is there a way to get that on the Patreon?
I am trying so hard to find another way to put a podcast up that would have our old episodes on it, that they can just listen to that, and it wouldn't be like a podcast that you would go on to Apple for. So I have all that almost figured out. But
all right, well, you and I will talk later. So
yeah,
all right,
that's all I got.
All I got is coming up at the Hamburg Reptile Show on June 14th. And that's my 39th birthday. So if somebody doesn't show up there, I will be very offended. So come and buy snakes, and then I can buy more snakes for my birthday. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Are you 40 yet?
No, I said 39. What are you trying to add another year here? Like, what? Why are you trying to do that to me?
Trying to get you closer to me.
Yeah,
man.
Shut up. So, but that's what we got. I updated the pictures on the website, and there are more animals going up for sale soon because I got to get an entire collection of rhino rat snakes up on the website. And yeah, that's all we have for this episode. So thanks everybody for listening, and we're going to catch everybody back here next week for some more Morelia Python Radio. Good night.